to these small villages in Africa where it could just burn out.
Right.
And that's what's frightening, I think. Virology, which I'm not very well versed in, but virology says, if you introduce the virus into a population like that, it will mutate. It will just use the media, people as media, to mutate to become like the best virus it can. And that's very frightening.
Yeah, no, it's very frightening, and I will say to my critics, the few people who've been complaining that I'm hyping up fear, that I wouldn't have to hype up the fear if the government were simply feeding some level of the truth out there. But the reality is we're not being told how bad or how dangerous it actually can be because, frankly, they aren't prepared to handle it. A nurse I talked to was explaining to me that most of the hospitals don't have enough hazmat gear to treat more than one patient for a short period of time. And then further, for staffing issues, because once you're working on the Ebola ward with the Ebola patient, you cannot go down to the surgery center or the pediatric ward or anywhere else. Once you put those nurses on that ward, you dedicate them. So the human resource at most hospitals between doctors and orderlies and nurses.
The infrastructure is not there to support this. Just studying Ebola required so much build out of infrastructure and process. So to imagine that an influx of cases into one specific medical center.
The United States health system is not designed to treat infectious diseases. It is designed to deal with chronic diseases. Now I got another caller coming in here. Second caller, how are you?
Hey, Carl, how's it going, brothers? GG.
Hey, GG.
I don't want to chime in and interrupt your conversation.
You're on,
Go ahead.
my friend.
I'll wait here for a second. I'm here?
You're here. Go ahead.
Listen, there's no reason that we need to sit and talk about what we're going to do, what we have to do, what can protect us. Listen, I want to publicly say to you, I apologize, because I remember having a conversation with you when this first erupted, and it was in Africa, and I said to you, Carl, there's nothing to worry about. It's not coming over here. You remember that?
I do remember that, yes.
And so I want to apologize because I was wrong, and when I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But, I'm reading articles today that tell me that Bill Gates and the United States government have had this patent since 2006, and that the CDC owns the patent and all the future strains and also the antidote. Now, they're talking about MZAP. What's that? MZAP is what it's called?
Yeah, ZMAP or whatever.
ZMAP. Okay, that's it. ZMAP. They said it's the only thing that worked on those two patients that they brought over initially. However, there is no ZMAP, and they're trying to get a push on it to be made.
Apparently, it's one of these biologicals that's grown in tobacco plants. And so you have to grow a phenomenal number of tobacco plants and then harvest it out of them in very small quantities. It's very difficult to do, but tobacco plants are being used to grow a lot of different things. Now, I'll give you an example. If you're trying to grow a chemical or an enzyme or an amino or something for an immunoassay, tobacco works fine because you don't need large quantities. To treat somebody with this ZMAP, you need to create large quantities of the drug. And producing it through the tobacco is just getting ramped up, and it's going to be a long time. You have to grow a whole freaking crop, so you can't just create it out of thin air.
I should be all right. I smoke almost 3 packs a day.
If they give you the right, tobacco, my friend.
Right. Now listen though, seriously. Now you could maybe take it, and I don't know why people don't do this. I'm thinking about maybe just starting some antibiotics. As a self-defense.
Well,
because if you put up something and there's something there to maybe help fight it off,
the antibiotic
you might be helping yourself.
The antibiotic will not help you with the virus itself because antibiotics only only affect bacteria. But what an antibiotic might do is keep you clear of a secondary infection, because one of the things that happens when you get Ebola or any other sort of serious disease that causes systemic shutdowns is all the little bacteria that have been floating around in your body otherwise, which would have just been, kicked to the curb, suddenly become opportunistic infections.
Right. That's what I'm saying. So if maybe people, I'm thinking about it. I mean, I'm not saying it's for everybody, but, it's something to think about, because you got to think about how to protect yourself, because the emergency rooms are going to be full, because every time somebody gets the sniffles or their temperature is 98.9, you know what I mean, up a degree, they're going to run to the hospital.
So Gigi, let's talk about this for a second, okay? Right now, what they'll tell you is they'll be like, well, just because somebody has a temperature and a fever and all these signs doesn't mean they have Ebola, because they haven't been, quote, they haven't been to Africa, right? Well, now that the virus is here and you can contract it in America or you can contract it in Spain, you can no longer use recent travel as a point of differentiation to make a conclusive diagnosis.
Right, that's my point. And that's what I'm saying. Like,
exactly.
Personally, if I get sick, I'm going to the hospital. Now, because I don't trust a TSA agent making $12.15 an hour with
his handheld thermometer.
Security. Yeah, I mean, think about it, Carl. They have enough on their hands already. They have to look for drugs. They got to look for bombs. They got to look for terrorists. They got to look for different types of foods and plants that you can't bring into the country, animals that people try to smuggle. You got to, you know what I mean? They have enough on their hands already, and you're giving them something else to do. You can't put the safety of Ebola in the hands of TA agents. It's not going to work. Now, and I believe if they really cared, and I say this again because I'm that guy that's going to say that this was put here for a reason, if they really cared and wanted this to be isolated and contained, tell me why they took the first guy to Atlanta. The second lady, I think she went to Minneapolis, I believe. And then they brought someone to Nebraska last week, that journalist from the camera guy. He went to Nebraska, and then there's one in Texas. So why are you spreading it out?
So here's the explanation. Are you ready? It goes back to what I was saying earlier. It turns out that one Ebola patient absorbs so many staffers, okay, that no hospital is really outfitted to treat multiple Ebola patients at the same time.
Bring the people in.
I know, but I'm just saying. So here's where it goes.
Bring the people in. Like, for instance, they're wanting to take military over to Africa. If you're wanting to take people who are not even trained, okay, they're going to take these young men and women and they're going to give them a quick 30-day course in how to treat Ebola, okay? And they're going to send them over there and in hopes that it works. Why can't you send a group of doctors from Nebraska, Texas, and Minnesota down to Atlanta, if that's where you wanted to do it at initially? And then you keep all these patients in one place and detained. That way it does not get an outbreak. No, you're not telling me that you didn't want it here, because I'm looking at a map of Ebola outbreaks, okay, and it looks like there's 2 countries in Africa that have outbreaks, Nigeria, and one I can't even get my eyes on to read the name of it. And then it jumps all the way to the United States.
Right.
Okay? There's a couple countries in between these other 2 countries that don't have
air travel.
No, it's not air travel. To me, I don't think so, because I would think that the other countries around these other 2 would have outbreaks as well.
Right.
You see what I mean? If it was travel by air, then I would think there would be a lot more countries grouped together that had outbreaks.
Now,
these are all split up. This is going, jumping from here to here across the sea and then up to Spain.
Well, no, it's going to continue.
Saudi Arabia.
It's going to continue to go. Now, let me just completely turn tax on you for a minute, because I want to test you for a second. Say test you.
Sure.
But now, I just want to ask you about something. Did you see this thing with J.P. Morgan Chase being penetrated by foreign hackers?
I did not, but it wouldn't surprise me.
there was a cyber attack on them, and they think this was Russia fighting back based on our sanctions on them. And and so it was. It's been like 3 months or so, or a little longer, since they first found these attacks. But it looks like it could be Russian cyber warfare. I turn your attention to that only to say, while the Ebola crisis rages on, there's a lot of stuff going on in the background that we need to pay attention to as well.
Well, of course. And that's what I say. I turn the news on, and it's all Ebola. It's all Ebola. It's all Ebola. But everyone's supposed to be, hey, there's nothing to worry about. But it's all over the news. It's all over everything. It's all Ebola. Now, we're not supposed to be worried about it, but that's all they're talking about. Now, to just bring up this point, I'm sitting here thinking about this. Saudi Arabia has Ebola. They're sending troops over there possibly to help fight ISIS. Okay, now what type of steps is being taken in Saudi Arabia, being the country that it is? It's not, up to date. Yeah, right. They have money, but they're not up to date medically. It's a very rich country, but they're not up to date with medical.
Oh, no, and in fact, even India, for instance, if somebody goes to India, their medical system is not nearly as sterile, say, as ours. And so that's one of the things they were saying is one of these Ebola guys goes back to India, it's going to be a big problem.
Right. So what this thing is if we know and we really feel, the people that feel like me, you, and what do you do about it? Because I really feel that here's another question. Now, they were going to charge the guy in Texas, right? They was talking about pressing charges on him for coming to the United States with Ebola.
Right.
Okay? Now, here's my question. Why can't I sue the federal government for putting my life in danger for bringing Ebola to this country? Because in reality, they brought it here.
You can only sue the government for what the government lets you sue them for, because the king is sovereign and therefore immune from lawsuits unless he chooses to allow you to sue him. So you're basically SOL, and that's not statute of limitations. In this case, it's shit out of luck.
Right.
Now, by the way, Gigi, listen to this. Okay, I'm going to read you an article. This is from WCNC.com, Charlotte.
WCNBC.
Yeah, WNBC. NBC.
NBC.
Yeah. All right. We don't have any pig vomits here, or pig virus, depending on which version of the story one is.
Right.
Crews transported a patient exhibiting signs and symptoms of Ebola from a Frisco Care Now to Texas Health Presbyterian Hospital. Right now, there are more questions than answers. Okay, spokesman for the hospital. Yeah, gee, thanks. The patient was identified as Sergeant Michael Monning, a deputy who accompanied county health officials Zachary Thompson and Christopher Perkins in the apartment where Thomas Eric Duncan stayed in Dallas. Okay, so far so good. Makes sense. The deputy was ordered to go inside the unit with officials to get a quarantine order signed. No one who went inside the unit that day wore protective gear.
Well, they talked about the blankets and everything still being there. They talked about his family still being there. I would think. See now,
the patient claims.
I end up with Ebola. I'm from that officer, and I ended up with Ebola, and I lived, and I turn it again.
The patient claims to have had contact with Dallas patient 0, according to a spokesman for the city. Anyhow.
What do you do? I mean, there's going to be more outbreaks because, like we said, you can't track how many. You're an officer, okay? You're, say, the average police officer. He's been in contact with how many people.
But how did the CDC, right, and how did the CDC not, first of all, how did the guys giving the quarantine order, I want you to think about this, people. Think about this. The guys going in to get the quarantine order signed, why are we getting a quarantine?
They're not protected. They're not even protecting them.
3 of them are walking into the hot zone unprotected. Like, what idiot dreamed that up? Who was in charge?
Listen, it's crazy. I don't understand it. They say we got the best protection in the world. Don't worry about it. Now, we're the United States. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. And everything in the world that can happen to this country happens to this country somehow, some way. And it's just ridiculous. And it's just ongoing. Every single day I wake up, it's something else.
Well, let me bring this back to Pennsylvania for a second. my dear Governor Corbett has got the public convinced that Tom Wolf is going to raise taxes and therefore you need to vote for Corbett. But Corbett did the second largest tax increase in Pennsylvania history and has now refused to sign a no new tax pledge, but claims the other guy is going to run your taxes up. But he won't say that he won't. But for some reason,